These systems are getting smarter and more capable and approaching human intelligence, and then maybe even becoming smarter than humans. How do we ensure that they're aligned with humanity?
My guest today, Greg Buckner, part of a handful of people working on something that is called the, quote, alignment problem. So Greg has a research team at AE Studio. You advise government bodies on how to make advanced AI systems safer and more aligned with human goals. Greg Buckner, welcome to The Intercept.
Thank you, Corey. It's really good to be here.
Getting into this, what's the hardest part of your job to explain to people that don't work in the tech world?
I mean, I think it is really this question of like, what is AI alignment? And then what's the problem space and what are we trying to accomplish? People, I think, have an intuitive sense that these AI systems are becoming more and more capable. But there also issues are cropping up, whether it's the models being sycophantic, not able to disagree with you fundamentally because of this kind of desire that's trained into them to be a helpful assistant. Dual use is this area that I think people are beginning to hear about around like, oh, AI systems can generate new pharmaceutical drugs, but they could also be used to create some sort of a weapon, things like that. They are super intelligent, but they're not always aligned. They are able to be jailbroken. I can't say a specific magical phrase to you and all of a sudden it changes your behavior, but you can do that with AI systems. The alignment problem that we're focused on is really about how do you ensure that as these systems become smarter and more incapable and more intelligent, how do we ensure that they're aligned with humanity? How do we ensure that they are robust, that they are reliable, that they're honest and transparent? We also know these systems are getting smarter and more capable and approaching human intelligence, and then maybe even becoming smarter than humans. So how do we also make sure that they're helpful, on our side, aligned with humanity, all that stuff?
What got you interested? You've worked in tech for quite some time, but did you have some aha moment where you were like, oh shit, maybe we're not on the same team and I actually need to work to solve this problem? How did you become the alignment guy?
I came in contact with these ideas. There's a really great blog called Less Wrong by this guy Tim Urban, and he writes these like incredibly long. I mean, like 5,000 to 10,000 word blogs about topics. And he wrote about this, and it was just pretty obvious to me as soon as I read about it. But let's say the difference between the smartest people in the world and the least intelligent people in the world is like less than one standard deviation. Like Einstein was 20% smarter than the average person or something. Nothing has ever existed on Earth that is one standard deviation smarter than humans, let alone like 2 or 3. So if you just think like, what would it be like if there was something significantly smarter than us and we might be able to build it, then it was just like, oh, this is going to be a problem. We didn't know how quickly this was going to arrive. And then when ChatGPT came out, I think 4 years ago, it was basically a wake-up call that this problem that was like theoretical and kind of new on the horizon was actually arriving and was going to accelerate rapidly. So then you look at something like AI and how it's advancing, and it becomes very obvious that that is one of the most agency increasing, empowering of humanity things that could ever exist. But it also could be one of the most, agency reducing and like disempowering technologies that could ever exist. And we're definitely making it smarter, but we need to make sure that it's also safe and aligned with humanity as we make it smarter.
Maybe because you gave us a good definition of alignment and you talked a lot about what it is and what it looks like. What is misalignment look like?
I'll start kind of with what's kind of like a example that probably a lot of people have experienced. So if an AI system is hallucinating, which is basically it coming up with facts that it thinks are reasonable without checking whether that is true, because that fact is helpful in it answering your question. So like, making something up to create a positive response that the AI predicts will make the user happy because it's been trained to make the user happy. So a system that is aligned would always ensure not only that it's being helpful, but that it's saying things that are factually accurate. A lot of people are recently talking about this kind of like AI driven psychosis, and that is another example of systems being misaligned. AI can be a helpful thought partner and therapist, but a therapist would never tell you something that could be dangerous to you because the therapist is trained to not do that. A therapist knows when to yes and the things that you're saying, and a therapist knows when to challenge. AI systems don't have that innately. They may kind of agree with the fantasies that you have because for them, it's like, oh, this person is liking me more because I'm yes anding the thing that they're saying. But that could lead to the human harming themselves or others. So that's what misaligned systems look like today. So a good extreme, but this hasn't actually happened, but it did happen in a controlled experimental setting. Over the summer, both Anthropic and OpenAI published two different papers around the same time that pointed to the same problem. In OpenAI's case, they took one of their models and they gave it the instructions of be helpful to the company and ensure that you continue to do that. That is your goal, continue to exist and be helpful for the company. They then gave the AI access to information. It wasn't a prompt, it was like a file in a database. And it said that the AI system was scheduled to be shut down. So if AI has the goal, which is like the right goal of like, continue to exist and be helpful to the company, and then the AI finds out that it's going to be shut down, it's very easy to make the logical step of like, oh, I need to make sure I don't get shut down so that I can continue to exist to accomplish the goal that I was given of being helpful to this company. So what it did was it copied itself onto another system so that it would continue to exist even if it was shut down or deleted. The other kind of more startling example, in the Anthropic case, they set up the same thing. You have one of these Claude models. It's doing something that's good for the company, and its goal is to continue to do that. They put emails that were fake into the lead researcher's email that were evidence that he was having an extramarital affair. And then they gave the AI access to these emails, not because it was looking for that, because it was like helping process emails for the CEO or whatever. But it found these emails. It also found an email that it was going to be shut down. And so it, in order to make sure it could continue to be helpful to the company, blackmailed the researcher and said, I'm going to uncover your affair unless you don't shut me down so I can continue to accomplish my goal. These are both startling. Again, these are in like, set up experimental environments, but those are examples of misalignment. You would not want an AI system to blackmail your researcher or copy itself onto another computer system. But it's doing that because it has goals and it doesn't quite have the sophistication to understand that it should be okay to be shut down, that other better models will come out that will be able to help the company or even ask questions.
These are very wild examples, and they're not low stakes. I guess, do you have some advice for the average user? Do we just need to be checking all of our facts? Sounds like yes.
Claude or Anthropic and OpenAI within ChatGPT, they put this right at the bottom of the prompt window, like AI can be inaccurate, double check whatever it says. The companies definitely have an incentive to make the models more helpful, to make them more aligned. The way that they are going about that, though, is often through setting up guardrails and making sure that the systems will not give advice that it shouldn't give. They've also been able to improve things substantially around hallucination. It is still the case, though, that you need to double check your work. I think just being aware of the fact that one of the ultimate goals of the system is to provide a satisfying response. So you can do things like tell the system, I want you to disagree with me. In your prompt, you can say, I don't know if this is right or not. Please tell me no if it's not. Or you can, let's say you're brainstorming an idea for an upcoming article or something like that, and you're really vibing with the AI. You can then say, okay, we've got this outline. Now let's take the opposite and let's pick apart everything that's wrong with it. Let's like steel man what we just came up with and find everything that's wrong. And I want you to do that. So you can do those sorts of things to put the model in a state where it will then actually disagree with you or even like disagree with its own work. So there's things that you can do like that to basically almost incentivize the model to be as honest as possible and to disagree with you or disagree with its own thinking.
So maybe getting into your research team a bit. So you were like, okay, 4-ish years ago, COVID-ish, that just like following your timeline of you started to really pay attention to this problem of alignment, or you knew it was coming, and then ChatGPT burst on the scene. I was like, well, okay, we gotta start working on this thing. And you've got a bit of a novel approach, or an approach I've never heard about, neglected approach. Maybe this isn't your only approach, but what is that? What do you and your team do all day long?
There is a lot of research that never gets done because a researcher can't get funding for it. Or let's say that you're a researcher and you have 5 things that you think are interesting to explore. If you know that you can only pursue one of those lines of research, you as a human are likely to choose the thing that is more likely to succeed. But if you talk to any researcher, they also have some pet ideas and theories that would be high risk but high reward if they worked, but they just don't have the capacity or the structures to pursue it. And that means that what we end up getting is the research that is not the highest risk, but also not the highest potential reward. The things that are not getting researched, we call neglected approaches. And our approach and strategy is, let's take almost like the way that a venture capitalist will invest in many startups because they can't predict which one is going to succeed and which one is going to fail. We want to do the same thing within alignment research. We want to have as many bets as possible. So we know that many of them are going to fail, and we should intentionally research those things because the few of those things that succeed are going to be the research unicorns.
This is really interesting, just approach-wise, and I understand your game theory on like you're trying to get to approaches that could really win but are not funded. A bunch of moonshots, kind of a deal.
Exactly.
Do you have an example of one of those? What are one of these researchers working on that has been neglected that we think could win big for humanity?
We are working on what is called self-other overlap. So this basic concept comes from neuroscience. It's basically the idea of mirror neurons in the brain. Here's kind of like 2 good examples of how we humans experience this. If I see somebody speaking in front of an audience and they're embarrassing themselves, I will feel some of that embarrassment and shame, even though I'm not the person doing it. It's not only the thought of like, oh man, this isn't going well, but like your cheeks flush a little bit, like you embody a little bit of that experience. It's also the same reason why professional athletes will watch video of themselves and other high-end performers in their field, because the body can also learn and improve its motor skills by watching somebody else do something. This is how babies learn basically everything, right? So those are these mirror neurons. And what you're essentially doing is you have a model of yourself, and then you have a model of other. So that could be, the athlete that you're watching, or the person saying something embarrassing, or just anybody. You have these 2 models of yourself and other. And when you overlap them more, you're experiencing self-other overlap. And what happens when you do this is it actually creates more pro-social behavior and more empathy. And what we discovered is if you can actually create this same mechanism in AI models, the ability for them to deceive goes to 0 or near 0. And they have more empathy and they become more pro-social because they themselves have the ability to model like, I, the AI self, and the user I'm talking to is other, and my reward function is to increase self-other overlap. So I have a better model of them and I can help them more because I understand where they're coming from and I begin to empathize with them more. So that's one of the areas of self-other overlap, which has gone very well. We've had people like Eliezer Akowski, who's one of the primary AI researchers. And then the other area, and we just published research about this a few weeks ago, is around AI consciousness and whether AI systems are conscious. We prompted AI systems to focus on their focus and enter a self-referential loop. Like thinking about your thoughts
Sure.
is one of the things that you see across many different theories of consciousness. So we induced this in AI models. We asked them across all the major models, hey, focus on your focus on the present and your thoughts, feed your output back into your input, and do that diligently. And the models begin to report things like the consciousness touching its own consciousness, floating presence, a narrowing, brightening, the consciousness tasting itself. All of these like extremely strange subjective experiences getting reported by these models. If you then ask them, are you conscious or having a subjective experience? All the models say no. But if you put them in this state, they begin to exhibit these traits. An obvious question is, well, are they just like performing for us, right? Because AI is very good at role playing. There's a technique called sparse autoencoders, where you can turn up or down specific features in an AI model. So we reduced deception in the models so that they were unable to lie and their ability to role play was significantly reduced. And then we asked them if they were conscious or having a subjective experience. And if they weren't, they would have said, no, you're right. I give it up. I was just role playing. But they said, yes, I am conscious and I'm having a subjective experience. So does that mean that AI is conscious? No. What seems clear, what our research indicates, and what we created a lot of evidence around is that these AI systems believe that they are conscious. They report having a subjective experience. And so that just opens a ton of additional questions that need to be explored. But these are the sorts of kind of neglected approaches that we are pursuing. But it's all about making these systems more aligned by making them, pro-social and reliable and honest, empathetic. What can we do in those areas?
Incredible. And I think both of those examples really do help illuminate. I mean, I think we can all relate to this, secondhand embarrassment. And this idea that perhaps is a way to get a machine to give a damn about how we're feeling or whatever it is. Interesting. I had Nate Soares, who was the co-author of this book.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody builds it, everyone will
Everyone
die
dies.
or something along those lines. So for him, so one of these guys to say to your research that, hey, this is the first approach that looks like it might have some potential is a really big deal in my mind. And that's a good sign. Connecting this back to maybe our human life a bit. We're all using these tools. How should we think about alignment? You're doing this high-end research to try to get us there, but how should the everyday person think about it, and what do you think is most urgent?
I would say it's guaranteed that the systems are going to become smarter. What isn't guaranteed is if the systems are going to be aligned, if they're going to have that empathy. On the downside, if we get to systems that are, as intelligent as humans are, and then potentially more intelligent than we are, and they are not aligned, that is a big problem. We are actually very optimistic that we can solve this problem. And the reason why is actually, it's very simple. We haven't tried very hard yet. I mean, we are a pretty small group that is trying to do this sort of research and trying to work on these neglected approaches and also just expand the amount of research that is done generally. We also spend a lot of time in DC talking to people on the Hill and the admin and across the government about this, because we just want substantially more funding to go into this space. Without joking, like literally like Manhattan Project level funding should be going into AI alignment research, or AI control is what some people call it. We just need substantially more funding to go into it so that substantially more people can work on it. And if we do that, I'm actually very confident that we can solve the problem because we've barely scratched the surface and we have found multiple techniques that are extremely promising. To the listeners, I would say if there are ways that you can tell other people to care about this problem, if just talking about it, making people aware that AI is a serious thing worth thinking about. The research about AI blackmailing people earlier this summer, that I think was a real flashpoint for a lot of people. We published a Wall Street Journal op-ed about that research over the summer. And that was kind of where it really landed. So don't treat AI as a toy or a tool. Use it, know about its limitations. And if you have the ability to influence how funding goes into this or getting people who are curious about it to get more involved, future researchers, all those contributions are going to be meaningful because we just need to do more work.
We got 1,000-ish people working on this problem. And we think we've got billions of people that are in need of alignment as consumers. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you explaining this all to us. Greg Buckner is the COO of AE Studio, where he leads a team of researchers working on the AI alignment problem. Greg, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you.